So in this segment of my work, I'm attempting to actually show what the relationship is of the theory of mind I'm suggesting, which has to do with gravity, and it's a gravitational theory of how gravity affects human consciousness. And since in physics today they haven't really discovered the graviton can't be incorporated into explanations of how human consciousness is affected by it. But I attempt to illustrate that my novel is a fictional presentation of the theory behind the novel, which is a theory of mind I'm seeking to introduce into philosophy. And it relies on reflections that I made about Chandrasekhar, the physicist, who made a very significant discovery after 1917, the theory of general relativity of Einstein, when he was traveling from India to Great Britain. And he was traveling on a ship, and I believe that the very heavy gravitational pull of the oceans actually allowed him to do more computations within general relativity than a person who was standing on the Earth, relative to a person standing on the Earth or being located on the Earth would have been able to do, because the ocean itself was exerting the force of gravity on his mind and accelerating the motion and speed of his computational capacity. So in this chapter I introduce the kind of ideas or conditions or geological conditions that might have been affected by an event in the past, like the creation of the Grand Canyon, that might have established that sort of effect on the minds of others around people. And I happen to believe that all throughout the earth there are such places where we are affected by such things. And for example, in Asia there's a tunnel where people go through the tunnel, and it's a huge stone tunnel that's carved into a mountain, and their cell phones actually change by a whole hour. They jump ahead by a whole hour when the people travel through this tunnel, and everybody's always confused as to what's happening there. And what's happening there is actually that the gravity exerted on their cell phone is changing the size of the electronic mechanisms inside, according to Einstein, so that more calculations or time flows faster inside those cell phones. The mystery of that is, how can the actual human beings be subject to that great of a gravitational pull without themselves having the character of their own thoughts and their own mind affected in a way that would harm them? And it isn't the case, because many people go through this tunnel every day and they notice this effect on their cell phones. And this is evidence today of the existence of this gravitational force that's affecting things, and that was explained by Einstein. But I will read my chapter or my prologue to the novel on the debutant and Madison X and folk and blues and Beloit College. It begins with a poem that I wrote, which is actually a poem that I am attributing in the novel to the debutant having written. And it's a poem of nature as in ourselves, or nature as we in nature and nature in us. And I consider this an introduction to the Lincoln chapter. These still and quiet hours, days and nights that have returned to our grasp, all in them can be seen, felt as the depth of time and mind. We are not ourselves ever, but vast swaths of the infinite deep. We return upon ourselves. The great path of time is but living ever and again, with surgings, from a mountain or a galaxy entwined throughout all. Do not seek to discover what was, for that still is. Do not seek for what will be, for that is. What is? Experience a moment's time, and forever too. There is not a future hope that is not at the moment true. You could not be someone else, and yourself too. I entitle this chapter Hercules and Earth, They and Us. It was 36 years before the World Affairs Center was built at Beloit College. Our hero, regaled in U.S. military clothing, stands before the corpses of 3 corporals from the Civil War. He nervously fondles the braidstead handle, ivory, of his sword. The handle has a yellow serpent, a black serpent, and a green serpent that are coiled around each other in such a way that each consumes the tail of the other. If you put this image under a powerful microscope, not invented until 2062, it would look like billions upon billions of infinity symbols woven together and oscillating in and out of existence of the eye of the beholder. If you could look in the heavens with a fine enough telescope created in 2065, Meade telescopes, this is what the whole cosmos will look like. The soldier has been ordered to stand there until a regiment joins him and conducts an investigation of how these men died. There are no marks upon their bodies, and there is no evidence that they had any confrontation or conflict with any others. It was rumored that a Shawnee tribe of Indians crossed paths with these soldiers 8 days previously, that the tribes were not hostile to them and shared food, blankets, and women with them. 34 soldiers in that region attested to the fact that on the Friday prior to the soldiers' arrival, the heavens had darkened for 29 minutes at high noon. Those 34 soldiers were conjoined to a force or contingent of 200 others, which had now disappeared. How could this happen, the young soldier Abraham Lincoln wondered. He examined each body carefully. He removed the shirt of each one. He discovered 3 serpent tattoos, one in about the place where the pancreas is, another in a place where the kidney is, and a third on the thigh of the 3rd soldier. One on each soldier, as on the ivory handle of his sword, which he had painted by hand. Not being given to superstitious thinking, Lincoln nevertheless thought it remarkable that the size of the serpent tattoos were exactly as on his sword, which was composed of bronze, silver, steel, and gold. It had been issued to him by the military, though he reforged it himself, adding the bronze and gold. He had carved the serpents from ivory and woven them into the handle. Whittling had been a favorite hobby of his. Upon careful inspection of each of the bodies, the 4th body lacked a tattoo, but it had 2 different tattoos. One was actually a square, and the other was a point. One was on the toe, and one was on the tip of the nose. Appeared to be of men about 16 to 18 years of age. Lincoln noticed that each soldier had evidence of blood in their ears, just a tiny amount, but the ears were otherwise unscathed. Abraham carefully spoke when they arrived to each of the 34 witnesses about how the sky had appeared to them. Most of the 34 said that the temperature that day had been in the 60s and that the sun had shone so brightly that they could not look into the sky. Then suddenly it darkened, in their experience, at 12:30 p.m. and 17 seconds, and the temperature dropped to 33 degrees. However, they may have been experiencing this since high noon, Lincoln thought, and Lincoln noted that the pocket watches of 30 of the soldiers had stopped at exactly that time. However, 4 of the soldiers showed him that their watches did not stop at that time, but rapidly moved through 24 days of movement as they watched them. What, for example, he wondered, had caused the men to look at their watches when the heavens were producing such prodigies? But that was natural. A change of light and of temperature signaled a change of time or season. On that day, Lincoln had been 56 miles south of there, near what is today Rochelle, Illinois. He noted that day that his watch had stopped at 12:17. It was not until dinner that he noticed, however, when he reset his watch, he moved the hands to 12:31, inexplicably, not noticing the watch had stopped until later that day, around midnight. Beloit College, 1848, 1859, 1862. These were the first days of the school. In each of these years, the college began to build up its formidable educational program. As the Civil War raged, professors at the college tried to establish the whither and whence of their establishment. Abraham Lincoln is known to himself to have visited Beloit College on 5 different occasions before his assassination, but he is known to history to have only visited it once. I have repeated the details of the first such visit, but that, one could say, was only a visit to the ground of the college. Strictly speaking, it had not been founded yet. The 3 soldiers were buried in 3 different graves at 100-yard measures from where the World Affairs Center stands today. 2 of them at the exact location of the Folk and Blues concert in front of Pearson's Hall. The 3rd at about the entryway of Robert K. Morris Library. These bodies form what is known in Euclid as an equilateral triangle, that which has 3 equal angles. A special case of Euclid's isosceles, a triangle that has exactly 2, or at least 2, equal angles. A deeper reflection of this triangle would give a profound demonstration of why Euclid and Abraham Lincoln, who from age 13 on carried a 1-volume edition of Euclid and worked on it each day of his life until the last day of his life, thought this the most important angle of the entire work.